Everybody loves to pretend they always believed in Blade Runner. Same with the Iron Giant. Now they are sacred, untouchable, film school scripture. But when they actually hit theaters, people shrugged. Tickets did not sell. Studios panicked. Critics argued. Audiences walked out confused. That is the dirty secret about cult classics. Half the time, nobody cared at first. Or worse, they actively rejected them. And that rejection is exactly what gave them teeth later. Because when a movie bombs, it stops chasing everyone. It starts speaking only to the weird kids in the back row. And those kids never forget. Number 10. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This one still makes accountants nervous. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, directed by Edgar Wright, arrived packed with style, video game logic, comic panels, kinetic editing, and still underperformed, by landing around 40 million worldwide on a much higher budget. It wasn't a small miss, it was a mismatch. Audiences didn't know what they were watching. Romance? Action? Comedy? Music video? The marketing couldn't pin it down, and casual viewers hesitated. But the ones who connected? They locked in. On home video, it found its people. Dorm rooms, early meme culture, repeat viewings. The rhythm clicked. The editing felt intentional. Every joke, every transition. Tight, precise. Michael Cera anchors it with awkward honesty. The film treats relationships like boss battles, not as a gimmick, but as a feeling. That mix of humor, insecurity, and intensity hit a nerve. That's why it lasted. Not because it was safe, because it had personality. Over time, audiences caught up, screenings filled, quotes spread. On what once felt niche started to feel prophetic. It didn't fail because it was wrong. It failed because it was early, and when the culture aligned, it didn't just return. It stuck, not mass appeal. Devotion. Number 9. Donnie Darko. This movie didn't just bomb, it barely registered. Donnie Darko, directed by Richard Kelly, opened to under $8 million. That's not a stumble, that's disappearance. And the timing was brutal. It arrived just after September 11th attacks, with imagery audiences didn't want to face. So theaters stayed empty. But the few who saw it didn't forget it. They argued, rewatched, tried to decode it. Because this wasn't clean studio sci-fi. It was messy, personal, unsettling. On the surface, it's simple. A troubled teen, sleepwalking, a rabbit named Frank, a countdown. But the tone is everything. Quiet suburban unease, the sense that something is wrong and no one can explain it. Jake Gyllenhaal anchors it, angry, funny, isolated. When the film leans into time loops and parallel realities, it doesn't feel grand. It feels like confusion trying to become meaning. Audiences didn't know where to place it. Critics split. The box office answered clearly. Then DVD changed everything. Late nights, forums, theories. The film demanded engagement. It didn't explain. It invited obsession. That's the shift. Cult films don't give answers. They give questions that linger. Over time, the mood deepened. The soundtrack, the themes, the feeling, it all aged into relevance. It failed publicly. But privately, it grew. And that's how cult legends are made. Number 8. The Iron Giant. This one hurts. The Iron Giant. Directed by Brad Bird, wasn't confusing or strange. It was clear, emotional, beautiful. And it still collapsed at the box office, barely 31 million worldwide against a much higher cost. Because most people never saw it. Warner Brothers barely marketed it. Weak trailers, poor timing. It wasn't rejected. It was ignored, and being ignored is worse. The story is simple. A giant robot falls to Earth. A boy named Hogarth befriends him. The government panics, but instead of noise, the film chooses quiet. The giant learns by watching humans. And what he learns is fear, Cold War anxiety, suspicion of anything different. The animation feels warm, human. The giant himself, solid, expressive, unforgettable. When it failed, the industry moved on. But audiences didn't, at least not forever. Home video gave it a second life. Families discovered it. He rewatched it, realized it wasn't just a children's film, it was about choice, about identity, about deciding who you are in a world that already fears you. And that ending, the giant rising, choosing who he wants to be. It didn't just land, it stayed. That's how it grew, slowly, quietly, through word of mouth, through emotion. It didn't win opening weekend, it won time. Misunderstood at first, then understood completely. And that's more than cult status. That's permanence. Number 7. The Fifth Element. People love to pretend this was always a hit. It wasn't. The Fifth Element, directed by Luc Besson, carried a massive budget for its time, around $90 million, and underperformed in the U.S. studios expected a clean, mainstream sci-fi blockbuster. What they got instead was neon chaos. And audiences didn't know how to process it. On paper, it sounds familiar. Space future, chosen one, action hero. But the tone is anything but. Bruce Willis plays it grounded, while everything around him explodes with color. Mila Jovovich brings mystery and vulnerability, and Chris Tucker turns every scene into something unpredictable and loud. The film doesn't whisper, it shouts. Costumes by Jean-Paul Gaultier, endless vertical cities, traffic filling the skies. It feels like a European comic book pushed to its limit. For many American audiences in the 90s, that energy felt unfamiliar, almost overwhelming. Critics split. The box office hesitated. Then time stepped in. Home video, cable, and repeat viewings changed everything. People began noticing the precision beneath the chaos, the pacing, the rhythm, the commitment to its own tone. That opera sequence alone became iconic. A blending beauty and destruction in a way few films dared. That's the turning point. It doesn't apologize for being strange. It commits to it, and that commitment built its audience. It didn't fail because it lacked vision. It stumbled because it had too much of it, too loudly, too early. Now that same boldness is why it endures. Not safe, not subtle, but impossible to forget. Number 6. Children of Men. This one should have been huge. Children of Men, directed by Alfonso Cuarón, carried prestige, scale, and a serious budget, yet barely broke even. Studios expected impact. What they got instead was hesitation. Because audiences weren't ready for how bleak it felt. The premise is simple. Humanity has stopped reproducing, but the world it builds is suffocating. Not distant sci-fi spectacle. Just reality, slightly worse. As governments tighten control, refugees are caged, hope feels extinct. That tone pushed people away. The marketing suggested a thriller. The film delivers something heavier, slow, tense, emotionally draining. It doesn't comfort. It confronts. It asks viewers to sit inside collapse rather than escape it. And yet, that's exactly why it lasted. Those long tracking shots became legendary. The car ambush, the war zone sequence. Not flashy, but immersive. The camera doesn't cut away. It traps you in the moment, forcing you to feel every second of chaos. Then there's Theo. Clive Owen plays him with quiet exhaustion. No grand speeches, no heroic poses. Just a man who has given up until he doesn't. When he chooses to protect something fragile, it feels earned. That idea stayed with people, because the film doesn't present hope as loud or triumphant. It protects it, carefully, briefly, at a cost. Over time, critics reevaluated it, audiences revisited it, and the world it imagined began to feel less like fiction and more like a warning. That's the shift. It didn't explode, it lingered. And sometimes, lingering is stronger than impact. It failed as spectacle. It endured as truth. Number 5. Tron. This one feels impossible now. Tron should have been a guaranteed hit. Neon worlds, digital battles, a man pulled inside a computer. But in 1982, it underperformed. The Walt Disney Company expected a breakout. What they got instead was confusion. Directed by Steven Lisberger, it arrived too early. Audiences weren't ready for visuals that looked like glowing grids suspended in black voids. Some viewers saw innovation, others saw something cold and artificial. Even critics hesitated, unsure whether they were watching the future or a failed experiment. The story itself was simple, a programmer trapped inside a system. But the tone wasn't. It felt mythic. Programs spoke like warriors. The master control program loomed like a digital god. The world wasn't playful, it was serious, almost philosophical. That level of earnestness clashed with expectations of fast-paced spectacle. So it struggled. It wasn't the kind of film people could instantly absorb. It asked them to accept a digital reality that, at the time, felt abstract and distant. Then culture caught up. As video games, computers, and internet culture expanded, Tron began to transform in the public eye. Those once questioned visuals became iconic. Neon grids turned into identity. Virtual space became familiar. Fans kept it alive. Gamers, tech enthusiasts, cosplayers. And they recognized what the film had seen early. It wasn't just telling a story, it was imagining a world people would eventually live in. That's the shift. It didn't fail because it lacked vision. Number 4. Dune. Oh, this one is messy, and that's exactly why it lasts. Dune, directed by David Lynch and based on Dune, arrived with massive expectations. The studio wanted a clean, accessible sci-fi epic. What they got was something far stranger, dense, surreal, and hard to categorize. And that clash defined its failure. The source material was already complex: politics, prophecy, power struggles, and compressing it into a single film created overload. Now add Lynch's dreamlike instincts, and audiences in 1984 weren't sure how to engage with it. They expected adventure. They got whispers, inner monologues echoing through scenes, grotesque, almost operatic villains. A world that felt both ancient and futuristic at once. Critics pushed back. The box office followed. But time gave it something theaters didn't: patience. Home video allowed viewers to return, to sit with it, to notice what it was actually attempting. The scale of the sets, the detail in the costumes, the physical presence of the sandworms, still tactile, still impressive. And the tone began to click. It didn't simplify its mythology. It embraced its strangeness. That's where it found its audience. Fans debated cuts, defended its risks, and leaned into its imperfections. Because Dune, 1984, doesn't play it safe. It commits fully. And even when that commitment becomes overwhelming. It failed because it didn't meet expectations. It endured because it refused to shrink itself to fit them. Not polished, not universally loved, but unforgettable. And sometimes that's the only thing that matters. Number 3. The Thing. This one, The Thing, directed by John Carpenter, hit theaters in the summer of 1982 and barely pulled in around $19 million domestically. Against its budget, that wasn't just disappointing, it was a loss. And the timing couldn't have been worse. E.T., the extraterrestrial, had just redefined aliens as gentle and hopeful. Then The Thing arrived and flipped that idea into something hostile and terrifying. Audiences chose comfort. Critics followed. They called it cold, nihilistic, excessive. In a year driven by optimism and spectacle, this film felt aggressive, like it rejected the audience instead of inviting them in. The premise is simple. A shape-shifting alien infiltrates a remote Antarctic base, perfectly imitating its victims. Trust dissolves. Anyone could be the enemy. That paranoia alone is powerful, but what pushed viewers away in 1982 was how far the film went. The effects were relentless. Bodies didn't just change, they broke, twisted, collapsed into something unrecognizable. At the time, it felt overwhelming, too graphic, too unforgiving. Now it feels essential. What changed wasn't the film, it was the audience. The atmosphere reveals itself over time. The isolation, the endless snow, the wind that never stops. You're trapped there with them, watching suspicion grow into fear. And the ending offers no release, only doubt that lingers long after the screen goes dark. Number 2. Brazil. This one didn't just bomb, it fought its own studio. Brazil, directed by Terry Gilliam, arrived wrapped in conflict. Universal Pictures rejected Gilliam's original cut. Too dark, too strange, too bleak, and pushed for a happier, more commercial ending. Gilliam refused. What followed was chaos. Open letters, trade ads, critics taking sides. A film release turned into a public battle over artistic control. And while that war played out, the box office quietly collapsed. The release was limited, the marketing unclear. Audiences didn't know what they were walking into. For a film with a significant budget and ambition, it underperformed badly. But Brazil was never designed for easy consumption. It immerses you in a suffocating bureaucratic nightmare, endless paperwork, malfunctioning systems, lives destroyed by tiny administrative errors. It's absurd on the surface, but the absurdity cuts close to reality. Gilliam layers this world with surreal dream sequences, moments of soaring escape that collapse back into control, paranoia, and dread. In the mid-'80s, that tone was alienating. Audiences expected spectacle. This delivered satire with teeth, and an ending that denied comfort. No triumph, no clarity, just a system that wins. Then time caught up. Our critics began defending Gilliam's vision. Festivals embraced it. The production design, retro-futuristic machinery, oppressive architecture became iconic, and its themes sharpened with age. Surveillance, control, dehumanization. What once felt exaggerated began to feel familiar. That's the shift. Brazil didn't fail because it lacked vision. It failed because it refused compromise. And in doing so, it preserved something rare. A film that doesn't just entertain, it unsettles. Too strange for its moment. Strange enough to outlive it. Number 1. Blade Runner. Let's be honest, this is the crown jewel. Blade Runner is now treated like sacred text. Film schools dissect it, directors echo it, entire genres borrow its DNA. But in 1982, it stumbled. With a budget around $28 million, when it earned only modest returns for a major studio release, even with Harrison Ford fresh off blockbuster success. Directed by Ridley Scott, it confused audiences immediately. People expected a clean sci-fi thriller. What they got was rain-soaked melancholy. Neon lights bleeding into darkness. Long silences. A detective story that felt less like action and more like a quiet meditation on identity. Ford didn't play a hero. He played exhaustion. A man chasing artificial beings who often seemed more human than he was. That tonal shift mattered. It clashed with expectations. Critics were divided. Some praised the visuals. Others found it distant. Studios panicked enough to force a voiceover into the theatrical cut, an attempt to explain what the film intentionally left ambiguous. It didn't help. It only diluted the experience. And so, it underperformed. But then something rare happened. Time gave it space. Home video allowed audiences to revisit it, to sit with it. And Blade Runner is a film that reveals itself slowly. The world pulls you in, endless rain, towering billboards, crowded streets that feel alive. You don't just watch it, you inhabit it. Then came the director's cut. The narration disappeared, the ambiguity returned, and suddenly the central question, who is Deckard, became fuel for endless debate. Identity, memory, humanity. The film stopped being confusing. It became compelling. That's the turning point. Blade Runner failed because it required patience in a moment, built on spectacle. It endured because it rewarded reflection. It didn't dominate opening weekend. It shaped decades. And that is the difference between a hit and something that never stops evolving. So here is the lesson. Box office numbers are snapshots, not verdicts. Some movies explode fast and fade. Others stumble, disappear, then grow roots underground. These sci-fi bombs did not win opening weekend. They won time. And honestly, time is the only scoreboard that really matters.